Frustration and fear. Just some of the reaction after Premier Francois Legault's government announced they are freezing two programs that allow immigrants to apply for permanent Canadian residency.
To announce a moratorium on two permanent immigration programs.
So the announcement was originally placed on social media saying it was about, quote, better regulation. And it comes just a week after the federal government said it would also be cutting permanent immigration levels by at least 20%. So joining us this morning from Montreal is Moshe Lander. He's the senior lecturer in economics at Concordia University. Welcome to the show.
Good morning.
So Quebec is going to freeze the regular skilled workers program and Quebec Experience program for 8 months. A lot of people, because they don't need to apply for permanent residency, don't understand how this affects PR status. Can you explain how these two moves will limit immigrants in Quebec?
It's effectively just limiting a path for people that are wanting to move to Quebec to be able to stay in Quebec and have a path towards citizenship. And permanent residency is usually a requirement for a lot of skilled jobs. And so if you're blocking that path, you're also blocking the route through which people are going to be able to get jobs. So it's an all-encompassing sort of move that the government's taking.
And one thing to understand about the permanent residency program, of course, is it's a points-based system. So you have to apply to be a permanent resident, and part of those points you gain is by work experience in the country. So if you've limited the amount of work you can do, you are limiting the amount of points that you have, and therefore making it more difficult for permanent residency. How is this move, Moshe, going to affect people who are right now in the process of applying for PR? And is there any recourse or a legal challenge that they can confront?
So you can take legal recourse. You can go and sue the government. The problem, of course, is that the government here in Quebec has an overwhelming majority. And so usually what happens is these things get gummed up in the court system. They can take years and years to resolve. And in the meantime, people are in limbo because they're trying to deal with the court system. And of course, what the government can always do is just pass whatever legislation they need to get around any legal challenges. It's not that they can negate the challenges. It's just whatever the court might say is an issue, then it's just bounced back to the legislative process to change those issues. And you can always come up with some sort of cat and mouse game that can drag this out to a point that people get frustrated before the government does.
The Quebec government, we know, has other laws in place that at best are what we would describe as culturally limiting. They say that this move is about housing and about affordability in the province. What do you think it's about?
Yeah, it's not about housing. It's not about affordability. It's a convenient scapegoat for that. A lot of Canadian cities are suffering from housing and affordability issues. The federal government has taken aim at immigration and saying that it's immigrants' fault. It sounds like a much softer sort of rhetoric like we're hearing south of the border, but usually what happens in the U.S. drifts its way up into Canada and takes a few years to become kind of the norm here as well. The thing with blaming immigrants is that they can't vote. And that they don't really have a recourse and they don't have a way to defend themselves. And so people feel a lot better about themselves. Housing affordability issues are essentially the blame of City Hall and not regulating the proper zoning laws to allow housing to come online. It's not home builders don't want to do it. It's not that people don't have the money to necessarily want to buy a home. So when you say that it's immigrants, the belief is, well, if we get rid of immigrants, all of a sudden housing becomes affordable. It's eliminating demand, but it's still not solving the supply part of the story.
Right, and always important to, the timeline is important to this, right? Housing, healthcare, affordability, these are issues that existed before immigration rates went up or down. There are approximately 600,000 temporary workers in Quebec right now. It's a big number. How could this move impact Quebec's economy? If we are making this economic state argument, how does that play out?
You know, the Quebec economy right now is the weakest in Canada. It's not an accident. You were mentioning earlier the idea that it's taking aim at cultural issues. Those sorts of things over time accumulate, and it sends signals to people that you're not welcome here. And when that happens, that's not just a short-term consequence, it's a medium to long-term consequence as well. If immigrants go back to their home country and they tell their compatriots, hey, you know what, I didn't get a nice welcome when I was in Quebec. It's not just when eventually this is lifted, if it's lifted, that all of a sudden you're going to find that immigrants want to come back. It has the potential to limit generations worth of people that want to move to Quebec. But it also sends a signal to the rest of Canada as well that if we can limit PR applicants, if we can limit people that are looking towards a path towards citizenship, is it those cultural issues that are also sending signals to the rest of Canada that you're not welcome here? The government's already said, if you're coming, you have a few years to learn French, otherwise we don't want you. So it's the type of thing that's going to really be a drag on the economy economy here, and it's going to make it very difficult to find a way to fill those jobs. The belief that immigrants are substitutes for Canadians is totally wrong, and it's always one of those misguided ideas that if we get rid of immigrants, then Canadians will fill a lot of the jobs they're taking. That's not true, and it's not going to happen. So if we're talking about labor shortages here, we're going to continue to talk about even worse labor shortages.
Senior lecturer in economics at Concordia University, Moshe Lander, always great to have you here. Thanks for coming on today.
Anytime.
If you liked that video, make sure to subscribe to the Your Morning YouTube feed, where you can find all kinds of new content posted every weekday morning.